welcome to this week's episode of Belcast. Firstly, thanks to everyone once again for giving last week's episode a listen and just basically for the support so far. Really is appreciated. Developments over the past week, we're now on Spotify, which is great. Unlike iTunes, Spotify didn't let us know, so we probably were available on Spotify for a couple of weeks now, and we didn't get any emails. So, you can now get us on Spotify, which should be a bit easier, and I know a lot of people use Spotify out there. This week's episode is going to be slightly different to last week's episode, and it links in basically to what I'd outlined in the beginning. This week's episode is primarily going to be an interview with Brian-Pelan. Brian-Pelan is a journalist from Belfast who's over 25 years experience in journalism, and he's also the editor and founder of View magazine, which is a fantastic magazine based in Northern Ireland and which tackles different issues ranging from suicide, maternal mental health, homelessness, loneliness, basically a lot of things that you would find the media don't really talk about in Northern Ireland. I really enjoyed the chat I had with Brian. Such a passionate guy. Here's the interview with Brian. Hope you enjoy it. There's a lot more interviews to come. So here we go. Tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now, basically.
Okay. I left school about 16 because I really didn't like the school. Didn't like a lot of things about it. My parents wanted me to stay on. I was due to do O-levels and A-levels, but I was quite rebellious young man, foolish in many ways, but rebellious. So I took a job as a young postman in Belfast. That was 1972. And there I was delivering mail. And you worked in the parcel office. You were called a messenger. And basically, you'd be doing any kind of job. Out with a van driver. You'd be doing full postal drops that the postmen would do. You would be delivering telegrams. That telegrams in. That's all gone.
Back in the day.
Yeah, so you'd be doing all those things there. And I was there for about 4 years. And then I left that and I worked in another, I would call them low-paying jobs, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I went to London and worked on building sites. I worked at a hospital in Belfast, Musgrave Park Hospital. Done a number of things, and then eventually it sort of took a while. Maybe I was a bit slow learner. It took a while that on one level I was enjoying myself. I was earning money. I had good friends. I was having a good time. I was drinking, going to parties, great fun. But there was a thing in the back of my head saying, you can't, this is not, you can't keep on doing this. So I came back home and I enrolled in a local college. Because one of the things that always kept me going, no matter where I was, people used to make a joke about it. If I was on a building site or I was working in a hospital, I was always reading. So I always had books. I remember somebody said to me one time, "What are you reading there?" And I says, "Camus." Another time, Jean-Paul Sartre. And it wasn't that it was being pretentious. I'd heard these names. I would read these books. I didn't understand all of what they were saying, but I liked to read. I just loved ideas. I loved ideas and kicking out assumptions that I had or that I thought were right. Now, somebody saying, like, I know I'm right. I love questioning what I was thinking. That was something in my head. So I came back and it's recently just been closed and turned into a hotel, College of Business Studies in Brunswick. I went there and I done my O-levels in a year. I done my A-levels in a year. Got decent grades. And then I went to Georgetown and I done a politics degree, English and politics. And coming near the end of that period where what am I going to do next, I started to play about a little bit of writing, not much, the odd film review. And some people said, you got some sort of talent. Didn't say I was great or anything. So you got some sort of talent there. Why don't you try the local newspapers and some magazines, which I did. And I remember the very first time I got paid, I thought this was phenomenal. Somebody's pegged me for my thoughts on a bit of paper. I didn't think I was any great shakes, but I was interested in areas, and just getting that money was a tremendous boost to my own self-esteem and my own confidence. And then slowly but surely getting my first job as a sub-editor. Sub-editors in newspapers is a strange breed, and they're kind of dying out now, unfortunately, in newspapers. A sub-editor is a journalist, and a reporter is a journalist. Yeah. The reporter writes a story. The sub-editor's role was to check the reporter's story in the evening, if it was a morning paper, to edit the copy, etc., write the headlines, design the pages, all that whole area, because you were the last, apart from the printers, you were the last physical journalist seeing those pages. If any mistakes happened, But more often you'd be blamed rather than the reporter, because the thing would be, why didn't you spot it? Rather, why did the reporter write the mistake in the first place?
Yeah.
So I'd done that for many years. I started off in the newsletter and then worked in the Irish News. Got my first staff job then in Dublin with the Irish Press. Done quite well in the Irish Press. Started to do a lot of writing as well, feature writing, but I was not primarily employed as a sub-editor then. I was a chief sub-editor, deputy chief sub-editor, production, a lot of areas like that. And then, ended up, my last role was Belfast Telegraph, 5 years there. And then the company decided to, in their wisdom or not, but nothing to do with me, to outsource a lot of the jobs. And as a trade unionist, I was not interested in outsourcing. And the conditions of pay and employment were changing. It wasn't something I was interested in. And I was also had worked in the newsroom for so long, and I always had an interest in social affairs. So I decided to leave the safety and sanctuary of a paid employment, applied for voluntary redundancy, and launched the magazine after about 4 weeks of watching daytime television and having glasses of wine and all sorts of silly things. And that's where the magazine came about, View magazine, which I'm the editor of it. So it started at a kitchen table.
Brilliant. And was it a scary jump to leave a safe job in, traditional print news to join and start up your own digital version?
Yeah, it was scary once the redundancy money ran out. Because the reality is, I'd worked in paid employment, as in salaried post and paid holidays and all those other benefits that you just take for granted when you work in a job. And all that was gone. There was no wage coming in the 30th of that month. There was no holidays for me to go away for 2 weeks, paid holiday. That is gone. But I suppose I didn't concentrate on that so much because I had put all my efforts into trying to make this thing work. How the magazine actually started is just unreal. A friend of mine who also does this sort of work, he's a production journalist on magazines. We were talking, and he was asking, well, what was I going to do? And I was saying to him at the time, I don't know. And he said, well, why don't you start up a magazine for the community voluntary sector? And I famously said to him, what's that? And he said, well, there's no magazine in Northern Ireland really for that sector. And then I started to look into it. I devised a dummy edition of the magazine, and I brought the concept, the idea of the magazine on my laptop around a number of organisations, individuals. Some thought it was a great idea and wished me all the best. Some were more curious, and other ones just dismissed me, like what is this? Yeah. So the first 2 years were hard, without a doubt hard. Anybody will tell you start up in business, more news starts, whatever, either crash and burn in the first year or second year. It's very, very difficult because whatever about your highfalutin ideas about politics and values, etc., you have got to make that earn. It has to earn enough to put a shirt on your back, pay your rent, put food on the table. If it doesn't do that, then it's just a vanity project, and vanity projects won't feed you. Yeah. So, but kept it going after 2 years with the valuable support of Una Murphy, who co-founded the magazine with me. I couldn't have done it without her and her involvement in the magazine. And then after 2 years, it hasn't got easier, but it's got more stabilised now. In other words, a number of organisations have approached me about themes they want me to work on, and I've approached other organisations and they've said yes. So it's a slow burn in the magazine, but it now has some respect. It has a lot of people who support and enjoy and appreciate the values of the magazine. And basically all I'm trying to do is create a magazine that looks at social affairs and said, here's a wide range of views on this issue, whatever the issue is. We're a theme magazine, so we pick an issue. Here's a range of views in this, and I offer it to people to do what they want with, to discuss, debate, ignore whatever. I'm a journalist. I produce the information. I'm trying to deal with subjects that I think often are either ignored by the mainstream media or sometimes just only touched upon when it's a sensational story. Yeah. And a lot of the other stuff is just seen as boring or of no great news interest. But for me, people's lives are important, and social affairs is a topic that I'm deeply interested in, and what's going on around us, not just Northern Ireland. Because the magazine, I have an international contributors. I'm a bit of a news junkie, so I look I'm constantly looking to stories. At the moment, people in Dublin have just, students and housing activists have occupied a house in Dublin, a slum landlord who evicted 68 families and threw them out. And these people came together and they've occupied one of his properties. And I think it's a really interesting story because Dublin, like Northern Ireland, has a huge housing crisis, a lack of homes for people, a lack of social care homes, sorry, not social care, but social homes are being built, are not being built, and it's a huge problem. And I'm a journalist. I hope maybe if I have time next week is go to Dublin and report on that story to see how it's developing.
Okay, brilliant. And of all those social issues that obviously you've addressed, suicide. The latest one was about maternal mental health, which was the latest issue. Was there any of those that have kind of stuck with you more than the others? You know, is there any that have kind of tugged on your heartstrings a bit more? Or left
the suicide prevention one. That was difficult. I mean, that came about with an organisation called Contact, and working with them, we decided, the counselling organisation, we decided to approach this theme. And I was treating it not blasé, but like all other ones, it was a production process. And I set amount of weeks to do this and gather up the stories. And as I started to get into it, 2-3 days into it, and the stories that I was encountering of people who had lost their loved ones is incredibly sad. You have to be heart of stone. You don't know the individuals, but not to be affected by their stories. And I can remember it was a daytime, and it was sort of just wasn't. I was thinking, have I taken on too much here? And then I went, as I normally do, I dived deeper into the pool by watching a BBC documentary about a woman who had lost her partner and was trying to find reasons why, if there were reasons, why he had taken his own life. So with the aid of a camera crew, she went on a kind of a journey through Britain, and she talked to other people who had lost their partners to try and make some sense. I'm not sure what sort of resolution she got out of it. Only she would know that. But watching the programme was incredibly about people's pain and suffering and just the sense of huge, huge loss. I remember sitting at the table, and I'm not a weepy person per se, but I wept at that table. And I remember the feeling when it was over the programme, I'm sitting there, I've still got this project to do. I looked at it and I said, you haven't lost anybody like that, man. Dry your eyes and just get on with it. And we done it, and we launched that magazine at the Contact's conference at the time in Titanic.
Yep.
And I spoke very briefly, and there was about 300 to 400 people at that conference, and a good proportion of that audience had lost loved ones to suicide. And I felt immensely privileged and humbled, and just to be with those people and to provide this document that talked about the traumas that they're going through, and also to argue for a different approach by government, that if we really want to address these issues, we really have to put in serious resources and really well-funded health professionals. There is no quick solution to it, but with cutbacks and other things ongoing there, and we've seen the figures of suicide rising, it's a complex issue, but the resources, I'm talking about real qualified resources, and a really well-staffed, funded health service, that would be a way of tackling it, linked into housing and education and many other issues. But we don't have that at the moment. We don't have anything close to that at the moment.
And you touched on it briefly there about cuts and everything that are coming from either Stormont or from Westminster. Do you see that as the biggest threat to kind of people in Belfast, so, people who are struggling or with suicide or with homelessness or things like that?
Well, what's happening, you were saying the latest issue is maternal, but we've done one since then. The newest issue was just come out last week. There's about austerity. That's one we just launched online. The print edition will be available in early September. The whole area of welfare cuts. Without going into too deeply, we were lagging somewhat behind the welfare cuts that had taken place in Britain. The parties here couldn't agree on it, etc. On what was would these cuts be implemented here? But eventually they agreed. DUP and Sinn Féin, the two major parties who voted to allow the Westminster legislation to come into here, along with some of the other smaller parties. Some of the parties like the Greens and some other ones opposed it.